chained slave girl feared the middle-aged man's cruelty, but he surprised her with kindness and warmth. The station's air was thick, hot and metallic, like someone had boiled blood and engine oil into vapor. Rust streaked every surface, running like veins across the walls. Vario's 9 had long stopped pretending to be a place of trade. It was a graveyard in orbit, and its bones creaked under the weight of cruelty disguised as commerce. Julian March moved through the lower merchant decks with the practiced indifference of someone who had learned not to look too closely. He kept his coat collar up, his hands buried in his pockets, the worn edge of an old tribunal ID badge barely visible from the inside fold. The corridors around him pulsed with neon ads projected in languages no one truly spoke anymore. Just legacy dialects recited by vendor bots, selling services no decent soul would want. He was halfway between Level 9's Reclamation Alley and the Biochem Quarter when he heard it. The fast, frantic slap of bare feet on metal. Not rhythmic, panicked, not hunting, fleeing. He turned instinctively. She came out of the steam like a broken breath, a blur of blue skin and ragged red hair. Shackles still hung from her wrists, the chain dragging with a metallic rattle that clanged louder than the shouts behind her. She wasn't running toward safety. She was running from pain, and she didn't see him until it was too late. The impact knocked both of them off balance. Julian staggered but caught himself. The girl collapsed to the floor, thin, starved, the outline of her ribs sharp beneath what little remained of her clothing. Her knees hit hard. She didn't flinch. Her hands splayed out, trembling violently. But her face didn't change. She looked up at him with eyes that were wide, stunned, but disturbingly empty. Not like someone afraid of death, like someone waiting for it. "Don't!" she rasped, voice barely a sound. "Please, don't touch me." Julian froze. Behind them, boots thundered closer. 3 men, slavers, by their smug expressions and grease-streaked armor. They didn't bother hiding it. One of them spat on the floor as he approached. "She's property," the tallest one growled. A ridged scar split his brow in two. "Ours. Slipped her lock rig. Don't worry. We'll fix it." Julian's eyes moved from the girl's shattered expression to the skin around her collarbone. There, beneath smudges of oil and bruises, he saw it. Small, red implants embedded beneath the surface. A faint pulse where chemical regulators had been inserted. Control nodes, the kind used to suppress fight-or-flight reflexes. She hadn't stopped screaming. They just made her unable to show it. He stepped in front of her without thinking. Something inside him shifted, snapped maybe, but it was quiet, a clean break. "I'll buy her," Julian said. The slavers laughed. One nudged the other with his elbow. "You serious, old man? You want this one?" "She's defective," another added. "Doesn't scream, doesn't beg. Got no fire left." Julian's voice was flat. "You have a control node in her spine. That's not defective. That's damage." Scarborough scoffed. "So? You still want her?" "I said I'll buy her." The transaction was quick. No red tape, no legal protest. Just a flick of credits through a black market interface and a data transfer to authorize ownership. They handed over the restraint controller, still hot from use, and turned to go. But before they vanished back into the mist, Scarborough leaned in close and muttered, "Hope you've got a strong lock." Defective ones sometimes remember how to bite. He smiled, then added with a smirk, "Oh, and we'll be looking for the other ones soon. You'll hear the screams." Julian said nothing, just watched them disappear. Then he crouched. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said quietly. "You're free now." Her breathing was erratic. Sweat clung to her skin, and her red hair, matted and tangled, hung over one eye. She didn't answer, didn't nod. Her gaze flicked to the controller in his hand, and her lips parted with a flicker of recognition, then dread. He hesitated. "Here." He set the device on the ground beside her. "You can take them off yourself if you want." He didn't touch her, just sat down a few feet away, giving her space. The corridor around them was nearly empty now. An insectoid vendor across the hall glanced over, disinterested, and kept skinning synthetic rats for stew. No one offered help. No one cared. Julian leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment. The heat made the air feel thicker, the tension even more so. He remembered another face. Long ago, long dead, screaming at a tribunal full of silence. A girl with gray scales and yellow eyes who vanished into a breeding unit when no one intervened. He hadn't been fast enough then. He didn't know if he was fast enough now. A soft clink pulled him back. The girl had removed one of her shackles. Her fingers shook as she tried to pry the second lock open. She failed once, cursed under her breath in a voice rough from disuse, then succeeded on the second try. The manacle fell. She stared at her hands as if unsure they were still hers. Her lips moved again. This time the words were clearer, but strange. I remember worse than them. Julian looked at her, but said nothing. Eventually she pushed herself to her feet, wobbled, nearly collapsed. He didn't reach for her, just waited. She stood straight again, barely, and then without warning, she took a step toward him. Her knees buckled. He caught her, not touching skin, just his coat sleeve against her shoulder to steady her. She froze, rigid as metal. "Can I walk beside you?" she asked. Julian blinked. "Yes." Together, slowly, they left the corridor. The sounds of the station rose again behind them. Vendors shouting, metal creaking, distant alarms that no one would answer. The neon lights flickered once, then steadied. Somewhere in the higher levels, someone was watching the transfer log data. And down below, the girl with blue skin and red hair didn't know it yet. But she had just become someone's problem. Julian, for the first time in years, didn't feel like a ghost. He felt like a man who'd made a choice, and it was going to cost him everything. The elevator groaned as it climbed, gears grinding under decades of corrosion. Its floor shook with each lurch upward. Inside, the girl stood pressed against the far wall, her body rigid, her breath shallow. She hadn't spoken since she let Julian lead her away from the corridor. She hadn't looked at him either. Julian stood at the opposite side, arms folded, eyes downcast. He didn't ask if she was all right. Anyone with eyes could see she wasn't. As the lift dragged them higher, past flickering bulkhead lights and grimy glass panels, Julian glanced at her again. Her skin, blue, bruised, almost translucent in places, had a waxy pallor under the lights. Long red hair fell over her face in tangled sheets, still damp with sweat and steam from the lower decks. Her knees buckled briefly at the next jolt of the lift. She righted herself before he could move. The instinct to help sparked in him, and just as quickly, he smothered it. She wasn't ready for hands, not even steady ones. They reached his floor. The door groaned open with a hiss of depressurized air, revealing a corridor quieter than most. Older, higher up, forgotten by those who fed off the market's rot. A broken utility drone skittered past, dragging a frayed cable behind it. Dried graffiti marked the walls, most of it in dead dialects. Somewhere down the hall, a baby cried, then abruptly stopped. Not silenced, just ignored. Julian didn't look back as he walked to his door. He keyed the voice lock. "March, clearance code 417. The door clicked, unsealed, and opened into his quarters. Not much to look at, just a single bed, a dented kitchenette, a manual med station, and a workbench covered in half-gutted tech. The lights were low and amber-toned, gentler than the fluorescence of the outside world. Warmth still clung to the recycled air, mixed with the subtle scent of old coffee and solder. He stepped inside and turned. She hadn't followed. He didn't call her. Just left the door open and walked to the back corner, retrieving a folded thermal blanket from a shelf. "I'll put this here," he said, laying it gently on the bed. "If you're cold." She hovered at the threshold like someone afraid of waking a god. Her fingers twitched at her sides, curled tight, then loosed again. When she finally stepped inside, her movements were clipped and wary, like the floor might collapse beneath her. Julian busied himself at the kitchenette, trying not to watch her directly. He set a ration tray on the warmer and added extra water for texture. The unit hummed. He took down 2 metal cups and poured the last of his clean reserve water. She tracked every motion, every shift of his weight. He set 1 cup on the small table, not close to her, but close enough to reach. "You're probably hungry," he said. "The food's bland, but it's real. No suppressants." Still, she didn't move. He sat down by the workbench, pretending to fuss with a broken emitter coil. Let her decide. Minutes passed. At last, she took a step, then another. She didn't sit at the table. She dropped to the floor beside it, folding her legs under her like a shadow. When the tray finished warming, she reached for it. Her fingers trembled against the metal. She ate like someone expecting the food to be taken away. First slow, then too fast. She coughed, choked. Julian started to rise, but she raised one hand instinctively, not to signal for help, to brace for pain. He stopped mid-step. "No one's going to punish you," he said softly. "Eat slower. It's yours." She didn't answer, but the panic faded by degrees. She drank water, a full cup, shaky but steady. When she finally looked up at him, her voice was rough with disuse. "You didn't lock the door." "I won't." "You didn't chain me to the bed." "I never will." Her lips parted, but no sound followed. She stared at the floor. "Why?" she asked eventually. "Why are you like this?" Julian leaned against the wall and let the silence stretch. "I used to write laws," he said. "Bioethics, interspecies rights. I thought systems mattered. Turns out they don't stop people like the ones who had you." She didn't respond, but something in her shoulders shifted, barely, not quite softening, but not so hard. "You're not the first person I've seen destroyed," he said, "but you're the first I could actually reach in time." Her voice was faint. "You think I'm in time?" That stopped him. He looked at her again. She was wrapped in the blanket now, more like armor than comfort, tucked around her with military precision. Her red hair fell over her eyes. Her lips moved again. "This isn't the worst place I've woken up." Julian didn't ask what the worst place was. He didn't want to know, not yet. Instead, he nodded toward the med unit. "You're dehydrated, starved. There's a dermal patch in there that could help, if you'll let me show you how to apply it. I won't touch you." Her fingers twitched again. She looked toward the unit, then slowly nodded. "I'll do it." He retrieved the patch and held it out, still sealed. She took it without brushing his skin. Her hands were clumsy with it. He could see she wasn't used to choosing how to care for herself, but she managed. When it was done, she curled into the corner between the wall and the bed, the blanket around her knees. Her eyes stayed open, tracking every movement he made. He turned off the overhead light, leaving only the desk lamp's warm glow. He took the floor, not near her, not facing her, just there. Neither of them said anything for a long time. Eventually, her voice slipped through the quiet like a fracture in glass. "My name isn't Unit 37. I think I had one. Once. But it's buried." "We'll find it," Julian murmured. "When you're ready." Outside the window, a faint shimmer of engine light passed, the sign of a freighter slipping out of orbit. Somewhere above them, someone watched the transaction logs. Somewhere below, the slavers remembered the man who interfered. But in this small space, insulated from the rot, something new had begun. Not trust, not yet. But perhaps the memory of what it felt like. The room was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. Peace had edges, softness, safety. This was just silence, heavy, breath-thick, and held together by the weight of unspoken things. Julian sat cross-legged by the workbench, repairing a cracked insulator cap under the dim cone of his desk lamp. His hands moved with muscle memory, not urgency. It wasn't about fixing anything. It was about not looking directly at the girl curled up 2 meters away, wrapped tight in a thermal blanket, like it was the last barrier between her and the world. She hadn't moved much since she'd applied the hydration patch, just shifted once, when the light dimmed. The way her eyes tracked everything, door, corners, his hands, wasn't suspicion. It was calculation, survival. She was cataloging threats the way other people might scan a room for furniture. He didn't speak. Let her sit in it. Space, choice, autonomy. That was the only thing he could give her she hadn't been allowed before. Eventually her voice came, quiet and dry. "How long have you been here?" Julian glanced up from the capacitor. "On the station?" 8 years, maybe 9. I stopped counting after the tribunal blacklisted me." She processed that for a beat. You were important before? I thought I was. He rubbed the back of his neck. They used to put my name on policy memos and ethical frameworks, gave me a nice office and told me I was saving lives. Then I pointed out they were sterilizing entire species for integration purposes. And suddenly, I was a liability. He waited to see if she'd ask more. She didn't. She just curled tighter around her knees, the blanket rustling softly. They relocated me here. Said it was administrative reassignment. That was code for disappear quietly. She stared at the floor. Why are you telling me this? Julian considered that. Because you asked. A flicker crossed her face, so brief it almost wasn't there. Surprise, confusion. She wasn't used to answers, not honest ones. After a while, she murmured, "You don't have to be gentle with me. I don't break the way I used to." That line hit him harder than it should have. Not because it was defiant, because it was resigned. Julian set down the tool. You shouldn't have to know how to break at all. Her fingers clenched around the edge of the blanket. I didn't always, but once you've been in the box. She stopped herself, a short, shallow breath. Then, doesn't matter. Julian didn't push. Instead, he got up and crossed to the kitchenette, rummaging through a drawer until he found what he was looking for. A small tin, dented and old. He opened it and pulled out a packet. Tea, he said. Synth-grown, tastes like dried dust and wood, but it calms the nerves. She didn't answer. I'm not offering it to fix anything, he added. Just, if you want something warm. Still nothing. He boiled the water anyway. As the tiny unit hissed and steamed, he found himself watching her more closely now. The girl hadn't given him a name yet. She hadn't asked for his again. But in the space between their words, he sensed something shifting. Not trust, but maybe the absence of immediate fear. When he brought the cup over and placed it on the table, not near her but within arm's reach, she glanced at it, then at him. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You keep doing that. He paused. Doing what? Letting me choose. Julian tilted his head. Would you rather I didn't? She looked away. I don't know what to do with it. You'll remember. He returned to the bench. Silence fell again, gentler now, like the kind that happens between two people who have nothing left to prove. She reached for the tea, hands steady this time, took a small sip, then another. It doesn't taste like anything. Number most things don't here. She took one more sip, then asked, why did you really stop them? Back in the corridor, he looked at her, not sidelong this time. Because I saw someone who still had a chance, and I've lived with the memory of someone who didn't. Her gaze met his, unflinching for once. Did you love her? Julian blinked. The question came from somewhere deep, older than her face. No, he said, but I didn't save her either. That answer seemed to satisfy something in her, or at least quiet it. She leaned her head back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. The blanket slipped down her arm, revealing a row of faded injection marks and a jagged burn along her shoulder. Cauterized, old, precise. Julian didn't look away. He didn't pity her, didn't ask. She noticed, and for the first time her voice softened just slightly. There was a room, she said. They didn't ask questions in it. They just made decisions, and if you screamed, they turned up the music. Julian closed his eyes briefly. Is that where the burn came from? She nodded. They called it tissue compliance failure. I didn't respond the way they wanted me to. They tried to fix me. You weren't the one who failed. The words came quickly, sharper than he meant. She flinched, not from fear, but from how loudly he'd said it in a room so used to whispers. He lowered his voice again. Sorry. She blinked slowly. You get angry when you talk about them. Yes. Why? Because they act like it's normal. She didn't respond. A long stretch of silence followed. Then she whispered, Do you believe in names? Julian furrowed his brow. Names? They took mine, she said, but sometimes I dream I still have it, like a thread I'm almost holding. Do you think people are still themselves without a name? Julian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I think names are like stars. Even if you can't see them, they're still there. She didn't smile, but her eyes shimmered in the light. A faint buzz sounded at the door panel. Julian stood instantly. He walked to the console, checked the lock cam. No one was there, just an auto ping, but his face tensed. The station didn't just ping randomly. He flicked the security scan, brief static, then a paused frame from earlier that day. Him, the girl, the corridor. Someone had logged the footage. He powered it off and turned, careful not to show it on his face. She watched him, eyes narrowing. What was it? False alert, he lied. Probably a scanner glitch. She didn't call him on it, but she knew. He crossed the room again, slow and steady. We'll keep things quiet for a while, he said. No risks, no mistakes. She nodded once, then tucked the blanket around herself again. Julian returned to the floor. Neither of them slept. But that night, she didn't face the door. She faced him. The station's artificial night cycle deepened, muting the already dim lights to a dull orange glow. The world outside their small room breathed with distant engines, leaking coolant and the quiet static of a society too tired to change. But inside, something was shifting, subtle, fragile, alive. She didn't face the door anymore. Julian woke to the sound of her moving, not startled, not running, just standing. The blanket slid off her shoulders as she stepped toward the table, bare feet soft on cold metal. Her posture had changed, less defensive. Her spine wasn't curled in. Her eyes, when they met his, weren't guarded the same way. I want to remember who I was, she said. It was the first time she'd spoken without prompting. Julian sat up slowly, letting the sleep fall from his body like dust. He reached for the kettle, quietly set it to heat. Then let's start. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. She sat cross-legged on the floor across from him, a little closer than the day before. Her red hair, now combed back with her fingers, framed her pale blue face. The bruising around her wrists had faded into a sickly yellow. Her voice was clearer. I wasn't born in chains. I remember that now. My people, we lived on a moon called Ellerith. Water heavy, low gravity, everything soft. We didn't fight much, didn't need to. Julian listened in silence, focused but patient. My mother was a dream singer. She used sound and memory to calm the young. I remember her hands, cool, always humming with vibration. They said our voices could affect nervous systems. That's why they wanted us, why they took us. She paused, drawing her fingers along her forearm, as if tracing the past into her skin. They drugged us early, took our speech first, said it made us easier to train, safer. By the time I was 12 cycles old, I could only scream in my head. I tried not to sleep because in dreams, I'd remember the lullabies, and that hurt more than the punishment did. Julian handed her the warm cup without a word. She took it with both hands, as steady now. They sold me 3 times before I was 15. The last one didn't want a singer. He wanted a silence he could own. He had my voice inhibitors implanted, said it made me prettier. Her hands shook, just slightly. Julian didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. Her story came like rising steam. Slow, invisible at first, then suddenly everywhere. I escaped when the last facility got raided. A bounty crew hit the place looking for high-value genetic stock. I wasn't worth enough anymore. But the chaos gave me a moment. She looked at him carefully. And then I ran into you. Julian met her eyes. You didn't just run, you crashed through. She huffed, not quite a laugh. I thought you were going to hit me, or sell me back, or worse. I know. Why didn't you? He set his cup down and leaned forward. There was a girl once. Not you, not your species, but close enough. She came to testify at one of our tribunals. Said her owner was harvesting her organs in segments. Claimed he had legal precedence. When I pushed back, the court asked for economic context. She disappeared 2 days later. He rubbed his palm like the memory had left something burned into it. I did everything by the book. Wrote reports, raised flags, filed an ethics override petition. But I never saw her again. She was silent. I stopped believing I could help anyone. Then you looked at me like she had, before they silenced her. And I couldn't do nothing again. She swallowed. You still think it'll matter? I think doing the right thing is the only way I stay human. That hung between them for a long, dense minute. The hum of the heater filled the space where Payne had just been. Then she spoke again, more gently this time. My name is Sayalari. He froze. The name seemed to hum through the air, soft and resonant. It felt real, weighted. Sayalari, he repeated. It suits you. Her lips quirked upward. Not quite a smile, but something near it, something possible. That night, they didn't sleep on opposite ends of the room. She still curled in the blanket, but when the light dimmed fully, she inched closer to his side of the room, close enough that her shoulder brushed his. He didn't move, and for the first time, she didn't flinch. When he woke in the middle of the sleep cycle, she was still there, breathing slow, her head resting lightly against his arm. No chains, no panic, just warmth. Outside, the station continued its quiet rot. Surveillance feeds pulsed behind hidden consoles. Someone, somewhere, was still watching. But in that moment, in that small, sealed room, nothing mattered except the steady rise and fall of her breath, and the way she'd said her name like it still belonged to her. The power cut without warning, just a soft click, and then the hum of the station's recycled air systems died. The room fell into stillness, thick, dense, oppressive, the kind of silence that made you hear your own heartbeat. Julian was already moving, hand reaching beneath the workbench for the emergency lantern. It blinked on after a second, flooding the room with a dull yellow glow. Salari stirred beside him, her breath sharp as her body tensed. But she didn't recoil. She didn't hide. She just sat upright, back straight, eyes scanning the shadows. Another grid failure? She asked. Maybe, Julian replied, though he didn't sound convinced. He moved to the wall panel, flipped open the auxiliary comm unit, and keyed into the public net. Static. Then garbled voices, then nothing. Outage isn't localized, he said. This might be a sweep. Her expression tightened. You mean a raid? Or a cover for one? She stood. The blanket slipped from her shoulders, revealing the lines of her collarbone. Thin but no longer skeletal. Her strength had returned, quietly, slowly, but it was there now. She moved with purpose, not fear. Do you have a fallback location? She asked. Julian blinked just for a second, surprised. She hadn't used that tone with him before. It was focused, tactical, like she'd remembered something sharp inside herself. I have an old maintenance duct 3 levels down, sealed and forgotten, but it's tight. I don't care about space, she said. I care about exits. He nodded and began packing what they needed. 2 rations, 2 patches, the data pad, and a heat cell. Salari moved beside him, already reaching for the thermal knife embedded in the med unit's side. She held it with the ease of someone who'd once had to fight just to breathe. Julian stopped. You know how to use that? She looked at him, calm, unwavering. I know what it means to be cornered. They didn't need more words, just action. 10 minutes later, they were moving down the darkened corridor, emergency lights flickering overhead. The hum of the station was off-pitch, too quiet in places, too loud in others. That meant rerouted power. Someone was playing with the grid. Julian guided her with silent signals, down a back stairwell, through a maintenance shaft, past a vent left half open from when he'd last checked it months ago. No one followed, but the tension hung in the air like smoke. They reached the fallback hatch. He pried it open, climbed down, and extended a hand. She didn't hesitate. Inside, the space was narrow, just enough for both of them to sit, knees bent, backs pressed against the cool alloy wall. The door shut with a pneumatic hiss, sealing them into dim, muffled silence. He switched off the lantern to save power. For a long time, neither of them spoke, just breathing, listening. Then Salari whispered, "This is the first time I haven't been restrained in a lockdown." Julian turned slightly but said nothing. Usually we were isolated, contained, sometimes drugged. They called it asset freezing, kept us from panicking or screaming. Not here, Julian said quietly. You can panic if you need to. You can scream. She turned to face him in the dark. What if I don't want to scream anymore? His reply caught in his throat. Something about the way she asked, not as a statement of strength, but of exhaustion. Like she'd screamed herself hollow years ago and now couldn't find a reason to raise her voice. He shifted, careful not to brush her by accident, but she moved closer. This time she didn't stop when their knees touched. I used to think quiet meant safety, she murmured, but it was just another kind of prison. He watched her in the dark, barely able to make out the contours of her face. Her breathing was steady, but something in her voice trembled. I don't know what I'm supposed to be without fear. You don't have to be anything, Julian said. You can just be. She gave a small sound, almost a laugh, almost a sob. That sounds like something someone would say if they didn't know what it was like to be afraid. Julian swallowed. I do. She turned fully toward him now, the air between them warmer, smaller. Then tell me, she whispered. Tell me what you're afraid of. The question hit deeper than he expected. He hesitated, then answered, voice low. I'm afraid of forgetting who I used to be, of waking up one day and realizing I stopped trying, that I let the world win. Her hand found his in the dark, not gripping, not demanding, just resting there. The contact was light, tentative. But you didn't, she said. You saw me. You chose something different. Julian's fingers curled around hers slowly, as if unsure the moment was real. You're not a symbol, he said. You're not a cause. I know, she replied. I'm a person. And then gently, like breath-brushing skin, she leaned forward and kissed him. Not out of romance, not yet. Out of something older, deeper, recognition. The need to know what it meant to be seen and to see someone else back. It was a short kiss, soft, uncertain. When she pulled away, she didn't apologize. She didn't look down. She held his gaze through the dark. Julian didn't speak. He only brought her hand to his chest, pressing it lightly over his heart so she could feel it racing. I don't know what this means, she said. Neither do I. But I don't feel afraid. He nodded once. That's enough. And in that narrow, steel-boned space, they sat side by side, hands still joined, hearts still raw, futures unwritten, but no longer alone. Outside, the station hummed again. Power returned. Systems realigned. But for the first time, Sailory didn't care. She had chosen something for herself, and it had chosen her back. The corridor stank of overheated metal and ozone. Julian pressed his back to the cold paneling, every muscle wound tight. His eyes flicked toward Sailory, who crouched beside him, her chest rising and falling in fast, shallow breaths. Her silver-red hair was tied back, but loose strands clung to her damp temples. The flickering light overhead caught the glint of dried blood on her wrist cuffs, relics of where she had been, of what they were still running from. She's got movement east side, Julian whispered, angling the tablet to reflect the surveillance feed. 2 guards left, both armed. They're scanning doorways, not watching the ducks. Sailory didn't respond at first. She stared at the floor, eyes open but seeing something far away. Hey, Julian said softly, pressing the edge of the tablet into her palm. You're here. Stay here with me. She blinked, swallowed. I am. A beat passed. Then, Sometimes it feels like I've already died, like the station forgot to bury me. Julian exhaled slowly. You're not buried, not forgotten, and we're not done. He turned back to the tablet. We need a distraction. I've got a thermal overloader in the satchel. It's crude, but it'll trigger the sensors. Buy us 20 seconds. I can go, Sailory said suddenly, surprising them both. He looked at her. Really looked. Her face wasn't calm. It wasn't brave. But it was decided. No, he said. I throw it. You keep moving. She shook her head once. You're better with manual doors and overrides. I'm faster, smaller. They expect you, not me. A long pause stretched between them. Julian's jaw tightened. This isn't your burden to carry, he said, voice low. Sailory reached up and touched the back of her neck, fingers brushing the faint scar there. It's already mine. Julian held her gaze, then, without speaking, handed her the thermal device. She rose slowly. Her limbs trembled, but she stood. 3 breaths, he said. Then move. She nodded. 1, 2. On the third breath, she darted around the corner, light and fast. Julian waited, heart in his throat. Seconds later, an alarm shrieked through the corridor. Red lights bathed the walls in warning. Julian moved. He sprinted for the maintenance shaft, sliding the manual override from his jacket. The panel sparked as he pried it loose, worked the contacts, rerouted power with trembling hands. He could hear boots slamming down the corridor, shouts echoing off the steel. Almost there. The door hissed open, barely a meter wide. Julian squeezed through and saw her. Celari running, barefoot, panting, eyes wide. A shot rang out. She staggered, caught herself on the wall. Julian cursed, reached for her. Blood bloomed dark along her side, just below her ribs. "Keep going," she gasped. "I'm fine." He grabbed her arm, pulled her through, slammed the hatch shut. They collapsed against the wall. Julian yanked open the med pack, hands already red. "You're not fine," he snapped. Damn it, say, this isn't how this ends." Her hand found his wrist, weak but insistent. I made it, didn't I?" "You almost didn't." "I would have done it again." Julian looked at her. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. Fierce, not the same eyes that had begged him not to touch her, not the eyes that had flinched at shadows or cowered in corners. "I see you now," he whispered. "I was afraid you would," she said. "Because if you saw me, really saw me, maybe you'd leave." He shook his head, pressed gauze against her side. "I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you tell me to." Her lip trembled. "Julian," she said softly, "I think I remember what love felt like. Once, before it was taken, before they silenced it." He didn't speak, just pressed her hand against the bandage, holding it there. "Is it still real?" she whispered. "If I only feel it when I'm near you?" Julian leaned forward, forehead touching hers. "It's real," he said, "because I feel it too." For a long moment, they just breathed. Nothing else mattered. The sirens, the smoke, the station falling to ruin. Only the warmth between them, the blood, the shared breath. Then she smiled, a small, tired, radiant thing. "Next time," she whispered, "you be the bait." Julian laughed, a real, unguarded sound. "Deal." And beneath the cold steel of Varreo's 9, surrounded by shadows and scars, something unmistakably human stirred back to life. The wind inside the ductless corridor was still. Not real wind, just the pressurized hush of old ventilation systems humming low. Julian sat cross-legged beside the emergency heater, cradling the cracked kettle like it was made of glass. It was his third time reheating water for tea neither of them would drink. Across from him, Celari dozed under two patched thermal blankets, her breath shallow but steady. They had made it. Barely. 3 decks above, the smuggler who owed Julian a favor had finally delivered. A scrapper's pod, half-stripped but flyable, hidden in the waste chute of Hangar 6. Not a luxury ride, but it had shielding, a filtered air tank, and enough charge to break orbit. That was all they needed. One clean escape. He should have been relieved. Instead, he sat watching the flame flicker in the corner, his heart stilled by the unbearable quiet of survival. "I used to believe people couldn't be saved," Celari said suddenly. Julian turned. She was awake now, staring at the ceiling, her voice a rasp from pain and sleep. "Not all people," she went on. "Just people like me. People who've been broken too many times." He didn't answer right away. Then gently, "I think the broken ones are the only ones worth saving." Celari's gaze drifted toward him. Her eyes were rimmed in exhaustion, but clear. "Julian," she said, "I want to leave this place. But not just the station, not just the men who hunted me or the pain they left behind. I want to leave that version of myself behind too. The one who flinched at every shadow. The one who thought love was just a trick to get close enough to hurt." He set the kettle down and crossed to her side. "You already have." She looked up. "Then why does it still feel like it's inside me?" He hesitated, then knelt and reached for her hand. Not with force, but invitation. Her fingers twitched, then slowly curled around his. "Because it takes time," he said, "and safety, and choice." Tears welled in her eyes, silent, slow, but they didn't come from fear. They came from release. Outside, a siren warbled faintly, distant and indifferent. The station kept going, even as its inhabitants cracked and shifted beneath its weight. But in this forgotten cargo nook, something solid was being built. Julian handed her the data chip he'd been holding since morning. "What is it?" she asked. "Coordinates," he said, "to a refueling station outside the Fairbelt. Quiet, unclaimed, agricultural hub, mostly human, but small population, and they don't ask questions." Her brows drew together. "You mean?" "I mean, if we leave tonight, we can be off the grid before the bounty updates. New names, new lives. Somewhere no one will know you as property, or me as a ghost of failed laws." She blinked, processing. "Why?" she asked. "Because I'm tired," he said, "of running in circles, of watching cruelty get recycled into profit, of pretending not to care so I can keep surviving." He took a breath. "And because I'm in love with you." The words landed like soft thunder between them. She looked stunned, not afraid, just still, like her world had tilted without warning. "You love me," she echoed. "I do," she swallowed. "Even though I love you," he said again. "Not the damage, not what they did, just you. The way you breathe, the way you try, the way you stand back up when it would be easier not to." She leaned forward then, so slowly it barely counted as motion. Her forehead touched his. "I think I love you too," she whispered, "but I don't know what it means yet. It means we figure it out together." She exhaled, shaky but certain. Then she nodded. They sat like that for a while. Close, breathing, alive. Later, as the station's shift cycle dimmed and gravity hiccuped with a failing power loop, they packed. Julian helped her dress, careful of her side wound. Salari insisted on walking herself, even when her knees wobbled. She held onto his arm not because she had to, but because she wanted to. By the time they reached the escape pod, dawn was a vague blue promise filtering in through the hangar vents. The ship's systems flickered on with a grumble. Julian slid into the pilot's seat. Salari took the co-pilot's chair beside him. As they disengaged from Vireos 9, the station shrank behind them, rusted and endless, still alive with trade and screams and dreams lost in corners. But that world no longer had their names on it. "Ready?" he asked. She glanced at him, then reached over and laced their fingers together. "Let's go," she said. And together they left behind a graveyard of broken lives, choosing instead a future neither of them had dared believe in. The morning came in soft and golden. They'd been living in a temporary outpost on the outer ring of Fair 3 for almost a week now. Nothing more than a restructured cargo dome nestled between red rock ridges and spindly wind towers. The air here smelled faintly of iron and clean frost, and at sunrise the sky turned pale orange before deepening into cerulean. The sun wasn't harsh like on the trade station. It was warm, steady, honest. Julian stood outside the dome, adjusting a solar panel that had been giving off a false red. His hands were steady despite the cold wind licking at his coat. A week ago, he'd been a ghost. Now he could feel the sun on his face and know what it meant to be alive again. Behind him, the dome's soft-sealed door hissed open. He turned, and there she was. Salari stood in the entrance wrapped in one of his oversized shirts, her bare feet silent on the threshold. Her silver-red hair was still damp from washing, curling loosely around her shoulders. Her skin, blue, luminescent in the light, glowed faintly with warmth she hadn't known just days before. She blinked at the morning, then at him. "You're always up early," she murmured, voice thick with sleep. He smiled faintly. "You always say that like it's a flaw." She walked toward him slowly, no flinching, no hesitation, just soft steps on compacted soil and the breeze pulling strands of hair across her cheek. Julian set the panel down and straightened. He didn't move toward her, though. Not yet. He let her come. She liked choosing her pace. When she reached him, she looked up, eyes still strange to him in their beauty, but no longer unreadable. "Last night," she said, quiet but steady, "I dreamed I was still there, in the cage. But when I opened my mouth to scream, I heard your voice instead." He blinked. "What did I say?" She hesitated, Then, you told me I didn't have to wake up alone. Julian didn't speak. He just let the silence between them settle, soft and full. Celari reached out, one hand rising, trembling just slightly, and touched the collar of his coat. I'm not afraid when I'm near you, she said. I don't know how to explain it. It's not logic. It's something older than that. Like my body remembers a version of the world where this, she placed her palm over his chest, was the only thing that ever made sense. His throat tightened. Julian reached up and placed his hand over hers, not to press it down, just to be there, to match. Her eyes flicked up to meet his, and then slowly she lifted herself onto her toes and kissed him. It wasn't hurried, wasn't desperate. It was the kind of kiss people give after long winters, after the storm has passed and they can finally exhale. Her mouth was warm, soft where real, and when he leaned into her, wrapping his arm around her waist, she didn't stiffen or falter. She leaned in too. Let it anchor her. Their breath mingled in the cold. The kiss deepened, but not into hunger, into certainty. When they finally parted, forehead to forehead, she whispered, "This is mine, isn't it? This feeling. It doesn't belong to what they did to me." "No," Julian said softly. "It never did." The sun broke fully across the horizon then, casting them both in golden light. And for the first time in her life, Sayalari didn't brace for pain. She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. And this time, it was her who led them back into the warmth of the home they were still building, together.